Birth and Parentage. The renowned German author, in the person of Irmgard Erath, once asserted, "With every newborn baby a little sun rises." So Providence made his unflinching decision that the sun should rise in the Thiong Maal's family, for the same Providence had decreed that every human should participate in such a glorious special sweetness and fortune of procreation. Within a blink of an eye Dushiek, for that is the name of Providence, commanded, "Let there be a new beginning, hope and joy." The command came into being when the sun rose within the said homestead and became the hope in the ambience of that household. Hollander Maker Thiong Maal was born into the Alwel Mel's big family of the Deng Kuol section, Pale community, Bor County, Jonglei State on January 1st, 1945 at Weir Mel. Early childhood and education. Just like his peers of the time, Honorable Maker spent much of his early childhood in the cattle camp. According to the Jing in general and the Bor Dinka in particular, spending time at the cattle camp is strongly considered as a basic foundation of informal education and general training. No sooner had the late Honorable Maker enrolled into Bor Elementary School at the outset of 1955 than his informal cattle camp life became punctuated with formal education. He was a classmate of many potential politicians of our time, such as the former Commissioner of Bor County, Honorable Maker Lual Kuol, and Mr. Maker Kur Jok, popularly known as Maker Kurlueth. The three were in Primary 3, which was then known as Intermediate, when Dr. Lamakol joined in Primary 1 in 1962 at Bor Elementary School, as Dr. Lamakol mentioned during the first funeral rite of the late Maker on 14th of December 2024. Dr. Lam also affirmed that Honorable Maker used to be his shield, a real brother who could protect him from being bullied by other older schoolmates, as it was a norm in those days. It was the same year Honorable Maker joined school that many children within the then Bor district, such as Honmon Ustaz Bolwal Mayen, the former Kakuma refugee camp chairman and current Jonglei State MP representing Baidit, Mr. Atem Yak Atem, a renowned journalist, from Abe, Honorable Maker Makwak from Patuyith, Magot Anyang from Alien, and Mayen Bul from Kongur. The year 1955 was dotted with tumultuous upheavals, since it was then that the Torit mutiny of the Ani Anya One movement erupted in August 1955. Subsequently, all the schools in the South ceased to operate. From the commencement of his formal education, Honorable Maker had shown unquenchable thirst for learning. He swiftly went back to school when the Sudan regained her independence from the British government in 1956. After completing his elementary studies at Bor Elementary School, Honorable Maker proceeded to Bor Intermediate School, which was then based in Malakal as a result of political precariousness in 1960. This was the same year when drastic and unwarranted changes took place, such as the alteration of Sunday to Friday as the official holiday, or resting day in southern Sudan as it was then called. It is a culture among the Bor Dinka that a young man has to get initiated into manhood. Ustaz Maker was no exception for that matter. He was initiated with his cousins Manyok Gugwe, Manyokdit, Manyokti Gugwe, Mamar Duatmal, and many others in or around 1961 at the age of 16 years old, which is a ripe age for the initiation among the Bor Dinka. That was the year when the infamous ferocious monster known to the Bor Dinka as Manyang Ejuet attacked Wunit Atir. This could either be 1962 or 1963. This is so because the Dinka, like many other Africans, recall or mark years using events that occurred in the past, which is purely based on oral traditions without any written records. In 1965, the late Ustaz Maker could not continue with his studies due to rampant political turmoil that had then blanketed the entirety of southern Sudan. That was soon after the famous Round Table Conference that took place from 16th to 22nd March 1965. On May 19th, 1965, the unruly Sudanese army went rampage plundering and carrying out random shooting in Bor, where a plethora of people were murdered in cold blood and innumerable houses got burnt, and other properties were lost to the unrepentant morons from the north. Under no circumstance did he start his studies within the same year, as a series of offensive events were successively unleashed by those tempestuous Arabs with their cyclonic behavior that disrupted education in the southern region. There was an impasse for studies as a result of political helter-skelter, as that season witnessed a lot of devastating occurrences, which were orchestrated by the ruthless Sudanese army, who could kill at will. These tragic occurrences include, but not limited to, the Juba massacre that occurred from 9th of July 1965 and the Wau massacre on 11th July 1965. Laconically, 1965 was a year of decimation, and people could only consider priorities. And of course, education was not a priority, but the safety of the people was. So the late Ustaz Maker Thiong did justice for himself by returning to the cattle camp for informal education, as well as his safety. Barely had the political hullabaloo subsided when the school programs resumed in the south. The late Honorable Maker swung into action and went back to school with his peers. In 1968, he joined upper intermediate in Rengtown. He was academically stable, and he, therefore, spent only the required number of years in senior secondary school and successfully completed his secondary education, after which he continued his academic journey by joining Shendi Teacher Training Institute in 1969, where he studied a diploma in education. It was then that General Nimeri ousted the civilian government of Ismail al-Azhari through a coup d'etat, which calibrated the end of the Sudan's second fairly democratic epoch and the beginning of the torturous 16-year rule of that unapologetic autocrat. Passionate about education, Ustaz Maker did his diploma studies with acute keenness. He later graduated in 1970 as a professional teacher after 2 years of vigorous training and learning. A reputable teacher. As soon as the late Ustaz Maker wrapped up his further studies, he joined his long-cherished teaching profession that he had been so passionate about. Getting a professional teacher especially, in the South during those days, was as rare as hen's teeth, because the teaching profession was so much dominated by the Arabs. However, the late Ustaz Maker managed to become one of the pioneers of the time. He was deployed to Gadarif, sometimes spelt as Gedarif, district in Kassala, eastern Sudan near the border of Eritrea, where he taught for 2 years. In the words of Kuol, 2022 past 63, Ustaz Maker Thiong was transferred to Madingbor, Bor Town, where he served for 3 years, 1972-1974, with other professional teachers such as Ustaz Cholgai Aru, Ustaz Majok Nhial. Ustaz Maker Thiong campaigned for building of more schools, which they later built in Bor district in 1972. This was to accommodate a burgeoning number of learners at schools. Ustaz Maker was not only a teacher, but a renowned advocate of languages. Ustaz Maker Thiong used to advocate for serious teaching of languages, and greatly emphasized on proficiency in languages such as English and native languages like Tuangjang, Dinka, Bari and others. He was certainly right, because a language is a vehicle. By our messages are transported. No wonder that he was fluent in 3 languages, namely English, Arabic and Dinka, which he could speak and write proficiently. Ustaz Maker was so zealous a versatile teacher that his enthusiasm for politics made him oscillate between his teaching profession and political life from 1974 to 1982. For instance, in 1974, he was unswervingly appointed and endorsed to hold the position of South Sudanese Socialist Union (SSU) Youth Secretary. In 1982, a vibrant revolutionary statesman, it cannot be gainsaid that the late Honorable Maker had an inextinguishable appetite for equality. One of many things that could make him feel at ease was fair and incorruptible treatment of people. The indescribable mistreatment unleashed by the Arabs was so wanting and unforgivable that most of the informed and enlightened Southerners staged a revolutionary civil war on May 16, 1983 in Boer Town, which is locally known as Mading Bor. As an advocate for equality and humanity, Honorable Maker felt it obligatory to be part of the struggle. He joined the Sudan People Liberation Army movement, SPLAEM, on March 1, 1984, with Brigadier General Panchol Jongkuchkur, who is famously known by his cultural name as Manyangjok Genu Cholgayaru, Brigadier General Char Koiloi Lik, and Kur Anyuat Kur. By then, Ustaz Maka was an education officer, as well as Ustaz Cholgai Aru, while Beni Panchal Jongkuch was then a senior security officer. During those days of horrible upheavals in the south, it was so cumbersome that one would not go out of Bor town without a departure order. So, being a security officer, Uncle Pancholdit played an instrumental role in facilitating their exit from Mading Bor to Kongur when they joined the SPLA War of Liberation. As security officer, he secured a departure order for 5 of them, namely Ustaz Makir Thiong, Ustaz Cholgayaru, Charkoiloi Lik, Kur Anyuat Kur, and Manyangjok himself. As aforementioned, they left Bor town for Kongur and stayed there in Kongur for 6 days. It was there that they joined those of Chagai Atem Biar and many others. On March 7, 1984, they proceeded with their journey to the Ethiopian border, where the newly formed SPLA was stationed. Ustaz Maker was trained under Koryom Division at Bonga in Ethiopia. After his military graduation, he was commissioned as First Lieutenant on September 13, 1984. He was the commanding officer of the Lion Battalion. He was then deployed to Panyidu. Subsequently, he was transferred to other different fronts such as Joku, where he vigorously fought with implacable might that proved him as a daring military officer. It was at Joku that he was severely wounded during the skirmishes with the northern enemies in 1985. He sustained so many wounds, but Nialik said no to the spirit of death. In that battle, many soldiers from the Koryom Division lost their dear lives. Prior to that battle, Honol Martin Magyar Gai had given a brotherly piece of advice to Dr. John Garang that it was not a good idea to commence the battle around Joku and other areas, because it was only the Koryom Division, which predominantly consisted of only people from Bor district, and that the war would cause imbalanced damages in that particular area, and defeat would then ensue as a matter of common sense. In fact, Koryom Battalion mainly comprised people from Bor, Twik East and Duke. At Joku, many of them were killed, and that proved what Honorable Martin Magyar had stated earlier. It is unrefuted that Honorable Maker's mantle in executing his duties with distinction had been a true mirror of his doctrines. He could not hide behind the veil of being wounded. After recuperating from his several wounds that he sustained while fighting at Joku, Honorable Maker was redeployed to the Adid Battalion. Ustaz Maker and his colleagues, such as Martin Magyar Gai and Ateng Alir Kwani, did a tremendous job when they went to Bor and mobilized a lot of energetic youth from Bor to join the revolutionary movement. Since they were men of untainted integrity, thousands of youth hurriedly joined the War of Liberation, and that positively impacted the revolutionary movement. It is a military norm to transfer a military officer from one battalion to another, especially a well-performing officer. Therefore, Hornemaker was transferred from Adid Battalion to the Rad Battalion of the same Koryom Division, deputizing his colleague Carter Edward Gai Garang Deng in the same year, 1985, due to his successes in his previous military positions. Suffices it to say that Honorable Maker was redeployed to southern Blue Nile in 1990. Dr. Lam was a zonal commander, and Ustaz Maker became the deputy commander. It was then that the two developed a very strong affinity. This was shown during the funeral when Dr. Lam described Honorable Maker as brave, compassionate, peaceable, humane, and added that he was a man who could not compromise a good cause. While serving as a commanding officer, the late Honorable Maker led so many successful battles and attacks wherein he became victorious. His bravery became a glowing shadow of hope when he captured many places in western Equatoria, where he was regarded as a red pepper in the eyes of the Arabs and their sympathizers. Under his command, the Arabs were not only badly defeated and decimated in large numbers, but he also captured Mundri, Maradi, Anzara, Lui, Jambo, and Amadi, as attested by General Mabil in one of his interviews with Aja Guang Media. His fame ran faster than a bonfire when he captured Mark Nicol, who then became a missionary within the Episcopal Church of the Sudan, Martin Kejimoro, and Dr. Egulu, who was an agriculturalist. These recorded victories made him one of the most admirable and successful commanders of the SPLA during those horrible days. Albeit his incontrovertible excellent military performance, the late Honorable Maker was a hard nut to crack. He could not entertain any nonsense orchestrated by some senior SPLA commanders because he was a disciplined officer who believed in respect for humanity and equality of mankind. That attribute cost him so expensively that he was ordered to go to battles without a gun. It was due to his uncompromised belief in equality and humanity that he was innocently accused of being Honorable Martin Major's sympathizer, like many others, who were falsely accused of being nonconformists or rebels, including Honorable Martin Major himself, who helped draft the laws of the movement. It was certainly ridiculous and laughable to accuse such people, who actually put the pants onto the butts of the SPLA and relentlessly convinced many youths from their areas to join the revolutionary movement and support it with their all fervor. However, the late Honorable Maker had friends who outnumbered his enemies, and he was then told to go to monitor the education of unaccompanied minors in Kakuma, Kenya.